I think it's fair to say that Cyberpunk 2077 has become one of the most hyped games that has come out over the last decade. Being first announced all the way back in 2012 before the last gen consoles were even released, there was a lot of speculation on whether or not this game would even come out. But with how awful 2020 has been as a whole, and with all the constant delays this game had to deal with, the question was brought up to whether or not CD Projekt Red would be able to deliver a truly breathtaking experience. However, by the time this review is uploaded, it's no secret that unfortunately that was not the case, and Cyberpunk 2077 has ended up probably having the worst launch that I've seen for a game since No Man's Sky. And while this game was nowhere near as amazing as most of us thought it could be, despite all of the lies that was told to us, the technical problems and delays, I could still see the potential for a great game that is just not here yet. Now, when it comes to Cyberpunk 2077's primary story, it centers around your character named V, who is a mercenary that makes their way all across Night City taking jobs for all kinds of different people, in the pursuit of wanting to make a name for themselves. During one particular job, you and your partner Jackie end up infiltrating an important building in order to steal an important relic. However, the job quickly gets out of control, and as a result, V must insert the relic into their head, and this turns out to be the digitized soul of Johnny Silverhand, who was a rocker/terrorist 50 years ago. It is then revealed that the relic itself has begun to start overriding V's mind, and it is up to you to decide on whether or not you will allow Johnny to take control of your body in order to give him another shot at revenge, or to work towards finding a way to get the relic removed safely in order for you to save your mind. Now, personally, I believe that the core story being told from beginning to end is a good one, and the developers did a great job at making sure that the majority of your choices throughout a good portion of the game actually have a major impact on not just yourself, but the characters around you. And while your character of V is very much dependent on how you choose to develop them, the majority of the primary cast of characters that V interacts with are all very engaging. And for some reason, I was getting some serious vibes from the films Blade Runner as well as Johnny Mnemonic that also starred Keanu Reeves, which I found was actually a pretty cool connection with this game. To me, the story was really at its strongest when V's interacting with the rest of the cast of characters that play a direct role in the primary direction that the story is going. And because this game is an action RPG, it very much encourages you to take part in as many side missions in order to open up different parts in different directions that the final outcome can come. It was also really amazing to see just how fully realized some of these cast of characters really were, as they have their own unique personalities and drives as characters. And to me, that really brought some of the most memorable and major moments that I wasn't really expecting. The performances from all the primary characters were all wonderful for what they needed to do. Some of my personal favorite characters that I spent time with, like Judy and Pan Am, helped me see different types of lifestyles that I really didn't realize when I first started playing this game, and I wasn't expecting. Your interactions with Johnny Silverhands really add a lot to understand just what this guy was all about and what he was fighting for. And while your first meeting with him is certainly less than welcoming, as you spend more time with him and understand his past and what he has been through, your perspectives on certain ideas and topics will certainly change over time. And that is one element of Cyberpunk 2077 that absolutely managed to pull it off with flying colors. I went into this game believing in wanting one specific direction, only for it to naturally change over time, and I found myself becoming a completely different character than I thought I would be by the end of this game. However, as amazing as these moments were when you were spending time interacting with these unique and in-depth characters, it is the moments that you are away from them that unfortunately this story ends up being downright deceiving, if not completely forgettable, and feeling like a complete waste of time. For starters, CD Projekt Red spent months telling us that the life paths that you choose at the very beginning play a major impact on your path as you play through the game, and I can tell you this right now that was a complete and utter lie. Outside of the prologue part of this game, regardless of which path you choose, you can do just about anything any of the other life paths can do. Even when it comes to relationships, as trust me, you can form just about any relationship regardless of what life path you picked, and it is really only decided by the preference that you choose depending on which romance character you can have. The only thing your life path does is give you exclusive responses in specific dialogue scenes with certain characters. However, this doesn't really matter because you will still end up getting primarily the same final result regardless of your choices. What's more is that 70% of the side missions are completely pointless and a waste of time. Some introduce characters that you think are going to have some kind of impact on the main story, only for them to completely disappear and to never be heard from again. Some side missions stretch over multiple missions, taking several hours to complete, only to get nothing out of them. The game encourages you to complete side missions, but can't tell you which ones matter and which ones don't. This to me is a clear example of CD Projekt Red wanting to trick the player into doing something that is completely pointless in order to make the game longer than it seems it needs to be, and I find this type of practice very upsetting. Now when it comes to its gameplay, when it's working properly, everything operates just fine. It's nothing amazing, but it does get the job done. As a sandbox first-person action RPG, there is a heavy focus on your preferred playstyle and building up your character to perform the best for that playstyle. At the beginning, the character appearance function is pretty expansive, allowing you to create the physical body of your character any way you want. However, I was a little bit disappointed that it stays locked on that specific look and you can't make small changes over the course of the game. You then move on to your starting attribute settings, and this is where things get really interesting. Your character attribute build is divided into 5 categories, and as you level up each one of them, you can then activate different perks for that build to enhance the performance of that specific skill. Now this gives you the option to approach scenarios in different ways, but there are very few missions throughout the game that actually reward you for taking a less direct approach. However, this is only possible if you take the time to really level grind and build up your characters. One thing I noticed is that though the non-story side missions may feel like a waste of time, their primary purpose is to allow you to level grind and therefore build up your levels, which then will allow you a chance to approach certain missions differently in later levels. If you just focus on all story missions only, you will find yourself having a much harder time to get through, as the straightforward approach in some of these missions is not always the best way to get through them. Combat is handled extremely well, with the game providing all kinds of different weapons that each have different functions on how they operate. You even have the opportunity to modify your body physically by visiting a body ripper, and it is here that you can apply physical perks to your characters that can help you in combat in a big way. When it comes to exploration, I think the developers did a fantastic job in designing Night City, as each district of the city looks and feels different from each other, and some districts are layered, which is something I do not believe I've ever actually experienced in any other open world game that I've played in recent years. It was even really great exploring outside of Night City into the Badlands, which has its own amount of uniqueness to contribute to the overall world building that Cyberpunk 2077 has to offer. Driving throughout the city is just fine with a large collection of different vehicles to choose from, and when it comes to things to do throughout the city, the variety of activities is plenty. When you're not focusing on the main story, perhaps you might want to take some time off and go on a few bounty hunts in order to take down some super-powered cyber psychos with their enhancements. Perhaps you'd like to join in a city-wide fight league and test out your hand-to-hand combat skills against a multitude of different opponents. Or even later on in the game, you can take part in some street racing. No matter what you choose to do, there is plenty of things that you can do in order to spend your time while playing this game, and there's no short list of things to do. However, as wonderful as all of this sounds, this can only be enjoyed if you are lucky enough to have them work, and now we must bring up the elephant in the room. Cyberpunk 2077 is without question the single most bug-infested, graphically plagued, crash-heavy game I've ever played. Now, I was playing on my PlayStation 4 Pro and ran into countless technical problems that made my gameplay experience very frustrating to get through over the course of my 45-hour playthrough. Long loading screens, slow loading textures, mission objective locations that just would not appear, stupid AI enemies that just made some firefights and stealth sections pathetically easy to deal with, some NPCs couldn't move, and all this happened even after the 2 major patches were downloaded in order to try to fix these problems. And despite all of these problems, I still could have forgiven the game. What isn't forgivable was the constant crashes that this game had. This screen right here popped up more than 20 times before and after the second patch came out. An hour did not go by without this game crashing, and sometimes this game would crash at the worst possible times. If I was in an intense firefight, it would crash. If I was simply driving down the road, it would crash. Sometimes I would have the game pause just to go to the bathroom, only for me to come back and find out that the game had crashed. And sometimes the game would crash immediately after starting up the game. Look, I can push through all kinds of bugs and glitches, but when you have an issue this consistently bad and have a game that is crashing this often to the point where it is actually stopping me from playing this game, that is simply unacceptable. This is on the developers, and regardless of what platform you are playing on, this game seemed to be plagued with technical problems, meaning that this game was doomed even with having 8 years of development time. CD Projekt Red still could not make a smooth running game, and that is just more than disappointing, as this is my first time actually playing something from CD Projekt Red since I never even took the time to play any of the Witcher games, and first impressions are a big thing for me. What this game is a clear example of CD Projekt Red biting off way more than they can chew and flat out deceiving all of us into overhyping this game to unrealistic expectations and then try to justify their actions, and that is something that just cannot be tolerated. As I'm sure you have figured out by now, my first playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077 on the PlayStation 4 Pro was a rather rough experience, and despite all of the problems, all the technical issues, and pretty much all the levels of lie and probably false advertising and even overhypeness that this game had to go on going into launch, there were still a number of key elements that really stopped this game from being an overall terrible experience. For starters, this is an RPG. If this had been any other genre that had been released in this condition that it was at launch, I easily would have tore it apart. However, this game did have a great story with an amazing cast of characters that I was very much invested into. And when the gameplay was working, it was very fun and addicting. Even with all the constant crashes, I still found myself coming back and pushing forward in order to complete the game. This game also has amazing potential. I could easily see this game being significantly better with at least a couple more patches that I'm sure they're going to release probably over the next 2 months. And at that point, I think that all of our experiences when we choose to come back will be much better. And this is a game that I absolutely have every intention on playing a second time on the PlayStation 5. When they do release, I'm pretty sure they're going to release a definitive PlayStation 5 version of this game, and I do want to play it a second time and do another second playthrough. And I think at that point in time, it'll be a much smoother and better experience, or probably closer to what they promised us after all these time in development. However, I think everyone's experience is going to be very, very different depending on the hardware that you're playing on. So, in my personal opinion, if you still have a base console from one of the last gen systems, I would hold off at least until all of these patches are out. But if you do have either a powerful PC or playing it on one of the newer consoles, I think your experience is going to be a little bit better. Now, in the current condition that this game was in, when I'm basing this strictly on my personal experience and playthrough, if I had to give this experience of Cyberpunk 2077 a rating, I'm going to have to give it a 7.5 out of 10. I believe that when I do play it on the PlayStation 5 and everything is smoothed out and it's a much better game, especially with all the sure to come DLC, I would give it a much higher score, probably to 8.5, but as of today, for my personal review, I think 7.5 is a good place to place it. So those are my thoughts on Cyberpunk 2077. If you happen to have played this game, I would like to know, how was your experience? Did you experience all the technical problems that I and many others had, or was your experience rather smooth? If you happen to enjoy this review, please do not forget to give this video a thumbs up and press the subscribe button if you happen to enjoy this and would like to see more content from me. Like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next time.